Just before we dive into the general discussion, I'm going to ask firstly Ricky and then AJ and Chili for any comments they might have about the whole question of doing stuff on country versus off country and what a mix might look like. I think we're all aware that there's protocols in both countries for how to do work on country properly, but here we've got a slightly difficult situation in that ideally some needs to happen off and some happen on, and I'd just like to invite their observations on how that might happen. Ricky, where are you? No, he's out of the room at the moment. Okay, he'll be back in a sec. Chili or AJ, any comments? Don't want to put you on the spot, but...
I can't go into too in depth of it because of, I guess, the complexity of it. But I know that through where I'm from, in the Coffs Harbour area of the Gumbaynggirr Nation, that part of law is that you don't influence the environment and you don't take species off country and you don't bring species that are not of country into your country. So it's a bit difficult to kind of break it down or unpack it a little bit. There's a lot of things that influence that through story and understanding of the environment in terms of impacts. So I guess myrtle rust is kind of an example of moving of species and kind of breaking cultural law, is that taking species into other countries then allows for those impacts to happen, and then vice versa, by bringing stuff back over, you're kind of allowing for unknown things to kind of be brought into country. And I think there's a lot of other stuff that kind of is built into that law, and that understanding is that this some species just belong on country and that's where they're from, kind of like its provenance and those types of things. So it's that kind of understanding. And I was having this chat before, is that at the moment they're talking about koalas and movement of koalas and stuff like that. So having species move from a country that's not theirs to somewhere else is just kind of it's against cultural protocol and cultural safety for those individual things. And plants are viewed at the same context.
Chili, you got anything you want to add to that? Or?
I think AJ covered that really well, and I think AJ has a better understanding of it than I currently do. But just relationship-wise, certain, plants that belong on your country, you're the custodians of those plants, and you have a relationship with those plants and a responsibility to keep them safe, like what AJ was talking about. And I just see, things like on Gurry, there's certain, there's residents and as well as, businesses that have brought over plants to Gurry for, even native plants for bush tucker gardens and things. And if they had have consulted with Butchulla people, they would have known what bush tucker is already there. And so on Gurry, traditionally or, naturally, lemon myrtle backhausia, for example, was not on Gurry traditionally or naturally. Our lemon myrtle is the tea tree, the lemon-scented tea tree, Leptospermum liversigii, and if they had have consulted with us, we could have told them that. Mm-hmm. And now when I go to these bush tucker gardens and things and see these plants, I go, yeah, they're native and they're bush tucker, but they're not native to Gurry. They might be native to the mainland or neighbouring nation or mobs on the mainland. But, and I go and see these things, and when I see that lemon myrtle backhausia on Gurry, a lot of the time it's glowing yellow. And, just that sort of thing, And even within mob, there is protocol when it comes to collecting permissions and things like that that need to be honoured, and to honour those relationships and honour the place, because not only do we have that belonging, those plants also have that belonging, just like anything else. That's why I think for projects like these, there needs to be real consideration, careful consideration and consultation with the traditional owners, and to do those things on country rather than off country, if possible.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Ricky, have you? Oh, there you are. Yeah.
Can you reframe the question? I was outside, sorry. Can you say the question again?
Oh, sorry, I can't hear you, mate.
Can you say the question again, or I was outside?
Oh, sorry. And just any reflections you might have on the questions of working on country and off country, and particularly taking material off country to work on versus keeping it on country to work on. I know you've got a complex situation in New Zealand, but if you've got any brief observations on it that you want to make.
Yeah, so we do have some experience in that. I can probably bring up recently we've got issues around our iconic Cody trees. And we've got this disease called Cody dieback that's basically affecting all our trees in the north, all over the place except in our area. So there was a program called Healthy Trees, Healthy Futures, a collaboration of a number of research organisations to go out and collect seed from our trees around all different areas in the North Island. The process that these organisations followed was identifying who the mana whenua or the tangata whenua of that area were, and then they go through a consultation process. In New Zealand, we have these issues all the time, which sometimes we have good experiences, sometimes we don't have experiences that we're happy with. So we had robust consultation through that process to identify who that mana whenua was, so that they can seek the appropriate authority to go into our native bush to collect those seeds, to take those seeds away, and to grow them and do whatever experiments on them. We definitely had concerns about that. One of our cultural things that is important to us is whakapapa. So we believe that the whakapapa of which is the lineage of that person or that species to that particular area, it needs to be kept in that area. So once we had the guarantees that they were going to treat our seeds or our trees with respect, to continue with the communication back to us, we were comfortable in coming to a formal agreement. Now those agreements, we call them cultural authority agreements with that mana whenua in that particular place where those seeds or those trees were taken from. In fact, not only have we had good experiences with that particular program, we've actually developed a really strong relationship with those key stakeholders involved in that project as well, which there's some people in this room that we were working with. There was Scion, the Plant and Food, Manaaki Whenua, and Department of Conservation. So going forward, we've identified a really successful template for us to be satisfied that when we give our seeds, they're going to be taken care of. So we've had some good experiences in that way. Have to point out that there were and there are concerns and suspicions because of how we've been treated in the past. But if we all enter into good faith relationships and keep that communication robust and consistent, then we've got some really awesome templates over in New Zealand that we can draw on.
Thank you, and thank you both. I guess part of the take home there is don't wait until there's a crisis before you start talking about it, which we have done on this. So, look, thanks for that. I think we might go into now the general discussion of goals, expertise, facilities, priority species, and other considerations. Heidi, you
Well,
got...
can Albie just have a quick word?
Yeah, okay, go for it.
Oh, is it Abby?
Abby's just going to provide a
Sure.
perspective on some of the work that they're doing in their area.
Oh, I'm not used to this, but I'll give it a shot. Tēnā tātou katoa. I'd just like to endorse what has happened today and thank all the organisers for allowing us to be here as part of your conference. I just came here on an iwi perspective, part of Emma's presentation today. But just listening to Nick and our perspectives and our goals as iwi and how we look on the view of myrtle rust, we've been quite fortunate that it hasn't quite hit the very top of the North Island yet, but we are kind of preparing ourselves for when it does happen. But we have the same goals and same understanding that what Nick has just alliterated today amongst this forum. But Ngāti Kuri takes a strong stand when it comes to taonga, and we've probably got two of the rarest species in our area in New Zealand, which is kaikamako and rata moyo. But I don't know what your terminologies are for these plants, but you can search it up, it'll be on Google. And we hold those taonga pretty strong to our whakapapa, the genealogy of the people and how they connect with the sea, with the plants. There's a lot of history if you follow back on why everything connects, and it all connects through whakapapa, through geology of which I noticed was missing, really missing in this conference, is going back to the history in the whakapapa, where these plants come from. Because if you go back to the rata moyo, and it says that if you go into geology of that tree, all the pūtakawa trees come from that specific strand of tree, that variant. And I've only just learnt this in the last 4 years, and it's been a taonga of ours for many years, which stock have helped us preserve it, I guess. But through deeds of settlement, we've been able to get a lot of recognition and be able to claim back a lot of those taonga, those species that we're contributing to learning a lot about myrtle rust. I have a few perspectives on where we should be going on this. Seed banking is key, and as Beck runs one of the seed banking areas in New Zealand, I think there should be another 2 or 3 run through the whole country, so taonga can be looked after and it won't be compromised if we have incursions down in those areas. It should be spread out through the country a bit more. Just listening to some of the speakers here today on how different states have got their own seed banking areas, I think New Zealand needs to follow suit. It's been a lot of learnings on how we could share a lot of the tools and a lot of the ideas that have come from this conference. I know I didn't just come here to have a feed, I just come here to take in and soak in a lot of knowledge to take back to some of the programs that we run that I look after a lot of our taonga, and to listen to the statistics on the number of trees, the number of endemic species that we've got in New Zealand, listening to a lot of the dock workers, and the commercial trees, which is a big problem. We seem to lean on the pine tree as an income over in New Zealand a lot, which I think is going back to the carbon credits, and they don't align to some of the native species that we've got in protecting some of their values within the, what do you call it, commercial sector doesn't align with the cultural sector. So there has to be a balance, and hopefully with all the big guns in this room, we'll be able to persuade the government to invest a lot more money into seed banking and help protect a lot of our, especially our rare species that mean a lot to a lot of us. I reckon it's quite crucial that the extinction of some of these plants is pretty sad. And Australia, I feel really sorry for listening to a lot of the stats around how a lot of them are close to the brink of extinction. So that's all I got to say. Wasn't much, was it?
Thank you very much.
Kia ora mai tātou.
You might have come here to pick stuff up, but thank you for what you brought as well.
Sorry, can I just say something real quick?
Real quick, because I do want to
Okay.
give people a chance to talk about other aspects before we break up as well.
I
So
just
go for
wanted
it.
to say that I'm only speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for the bachelor community with what I just said here just then. For that needs, I can't give you that. Only the bachelor elders and cultural authority in the community can give you that. But I just gave my own personal
Understood.
interpretation. Yeah, just wanted to say that.
I think all of us in this room, in a different and less profound way, also have limitations on who we can speak for in terms of our work organisations and things like that as well. But I think the spirit that's been shown at this conference and the collegiality that's been shown here means we can talk to each other pretty frankly about stuff, and that's a great thing.
Yeah, very much so. Thanks.
Okay. So we've had some perspectives from Jeff and Karen and from Grant and James on things like goals, facilities, feasibility, expertise levels, what we lack, what we've got. And in the time that's left, I just want to throw it open to anybody who would like to comment on any of that, really. We are having further workshop, as I mentioned, on Monday, Tuesday, which some people are going to, some are not. And we'll be Zooming that, but also recording it. So whatever level of extra depth we get into there will be available to you. But comments or contributions from around the room?
Got one over here, Bob.
Yep.
Very much. Kia ora whanau. Mostly just to piggyback off of what we heard to start with. So Tilly brought up a really big point, a really strong, poignant thing about how yes, it's bush tucker, but it's not from here. And in much the same way, a culture is what it eats. The kind of natural elements, the flora, the fauna, the fungi around us kind of inform that too. We are this because of that. And for that reason, it seems that a lot of the mana whenua that we work with are kind of hold on to, like, what is theirs, this is ours, don't touch it. And you, like, that's more than understandable. But what Ricky said is that, like, usually the answer is no, but there is a way around it. And if you are gonna be able to, like, if you can stomach putting that much effort in, because it does take a lot of effort, building relationships like that, it takes everything you have. It'll drain your energy resource and everybody else's forever, and probably it's worth it. Because as Emma brought up before, as we come to mana whenua with what we want to do, and eventually what we want to be able to do is do what they want to do. We don't really want to be the ones like conceiving of the thing and then carrying it out to completion, and then we're going to share, and they helped us, and that's not really what we're here to do. Is these people have proper aspirations and for now they can't do it by themselves, and so we have a role in that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Arnie. Damien. Need a microphone over here.
I guess one thing I'm concerned about is no one's really considering the provenances, and we seem to be mixing provenances here. So I guess just a bit of restraint before we actually mix provenances. Like to me personally, I feel like that should be maybe a last resort. Someone pointed out the different forms, and some provenances have unique endophytes, and if once you mix something up, I don't think you can undo that. So, and sort of just tying in with country as well. So just a consideration anyway, from my personal point of view.
Understood. Although, in fact, in the Rhodamurtis project and the Rhodamnia project, provenance tracking has been a big part of that. So they're not being mixed indiscriminately. The lineages are being maintained as got, if you like. Just before you do, yes, over here. Did you want to speak? No, you.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you could say your name before you speak, yeah, this is what accurately. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Heidi Dungy from Scion. Yeah, I think we're at a point where we need to put the plants in the ecosystem as the goal in the centre of all of this, and so I think we kind of got a lot of science capability, but I'd probably add on the need for, I do like the conversation about needing quantitative geneticists and breeders. We also need people on the ground who know how to drive seed orchards, how to do nursery work, how to plant things out, who are actually good in the field, some biologists, some field ecologists. And actually at the centre of that is the comments that we've just been talking about, is if we can't do breeding like we normally do, what is that going to look like? So I think we need to be open to reinventing what our current science is, to be able to co-develop properly with tangata whenua what that might look like, so you don't actually maybe have to remove it from country, or folks might want to, but we need to be open to the conversation of how to innovate around that in a way that's going to be a win-win for everyone. Cheers.
Thanks. Richard.
Maybe just a brief follow-up on what I heard, and then what the last two folks said too, in terms of seed source or provenance. In the U.S., we, at least on the West Coast, we divide the range of the species up on best available data into seed zones and whatever too, and then we don't generally move things between seed zones. It's a little bit more complicated now because of climate change, and what were appropriate seed zones in the 40 years ago may or may not be there. So obviously with landscape genomics and some other stuff too, I hear the capacity here maybe for many of your species to develop seed zones, so you would know a little bit more to avoid mixing things up maybe where you would want to and whatever too. The other thing I heard about capacity, both these, New Zealand and Australia, has a rich history of tree breeding and facilities and whatever too. But just like much of the rest of the world, that capacity over the last 20 or 30 years has diminished somewhat. It was good to hear what was out there, and that some of those expertise was out there. I'm not sure I heard, given the scope of this problem, what is really needed? What is the full capacity? Do you need to quadruple it? In the U.S., and this week in the U.S., they're doing this massive hiring of people associated with genetics, nursery, seed movement, assisted migration, and whatever too. I haven't seen that type of hiring in 30 years. They finally came to a realization, at least under the current administration, that they need to do triage and refill all these positions that they had let diminish over time. You have a huge new pathogen in here. Even if you had the capacity that you had 20 years ago, I don't know if Heidi and others would say that's sufficient or whether you need more capacity. So it would be interesting to hear that. Yeah.
Yep, over here.
I think from what I have seen from some of the work that you've done in Australia and the germplasm guidelines that Amelia led, in New Zealand, I think we really need to take stock of what resources and tools we currently have available for that kind of on-ground delivery of plant conservation. This week I've learnt some stuff that I had no idea, that certain CRIs could have the ability to do propagation or the drying down of seeds. Mana whenua across the country have drums that can do seed storage, and so we really need to have a national stock take to highlight the gaps in our current system, but also to advocate for what we want in the future.
Okay, that's a keeper. Angela?
Hi, my name's Angela Werner. I'm from Networks and Partnerships team in Threatened Species Operations in Queensland. So I'm looking at this from a state perspective, and I think my favourite quote from today was from Craig, where you said it's fascinating and a little bit scary as well. And that's exactly how I feel. I wanted to extend my thanks and congratulations to Perry and everyone involved in putting the conference together. I just think it's been fantastic and a huge success. And I appreciate the invitation and being able to be here. So I think the take homes for me, like Craig's program, we look at everything through that threatened species lens, and at the moment there's over 1,000 threatened species across Queensland that are on our books, and 700 plus of those are plants. But I see the value that I can bring in this space is that coordinated and collaborative approach in Queensland. So it doesn't just rest on the shoulders of Jeff and Fiona and Tilly and all the people that have been involved so far, that we can extend that network. We're also developing a working group, so until yesterday I hadn't actually met Ben from the federal department working on the threat abatement plan, so that's been really fabulous to connect with him and be involved with that national working group moving forward. But what's exciting for us is that my next task is to develop an action plan for Queensland and get a working group together with all the key stakeholders like Darren from universities and Jeff and everyone from DAF and all the, we actually have some forums of botanic gardens and things already, so it'll be great to just start linking everyone together and developing a plan on how we can move forward. And councils, I think a huge area where we need to get better is that First Nations engagement and helping people look after their country, and that's definitely a space we look forward to being involved in moving forward. And also, as Richard's mentioned a few times, that marketing and communication, and I think as a state government, I need to be communicating that urgency and emergency collection out there, because like we've seen from images over the last 3 days that we're running out of time for some of these species, and we really need to be out there collecting as soon as we can. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela. Is John Seaman still here? No, he's gone. Okay. Kathy, I'm wondering if there's anything you'd like to say about expertise, facilities, tenures, anything like that?
Yeah, look, if I...
Sorry, should say who you are. Beg your pardon.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Bob. Yeah, Kath Offord, I'm from the Australian Plant Bank. And apologies, but I wasn't at the first 2 days of this conference, but what I've heard today, I've done a little bit of reminiscing of my own and thinking back 10 years ago when we first realised that we had a crisis on our hands, and that over time the snowball of support for addressing myrtle rust the snowball has turned into an avalanche. And just looking, I'm amazed by the number of people that are attending this conference and the range of organisations, networks and community groups that you represent. So I think that we have the capacity, we have we know that there's a lot in front of us. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of species. We have some really good examples of how to move forward. And we know that we have capacity in certain parts of our organisation. So we have a number of seed banks in Australia that are doing, like our own, that are doing the research around what we can store, and in our seed bank, or what alternative methods of storage we need to hold these species before they do disappear in the wild. There's something that is inevitable, unfortunately, because of the way that the myrtle rust is manifesting for many species. So there is an urgency to what we're doing. So working together, understanding where our resources are, where our expertise is. And Richard, thank you for reminding me that I have a background in plant breeding, but I have not used that expertise for 20 years. And I agree with you. I think we have kind of relied on our existing plant breeding expertise, but we haven't really been training in that area. We do have some fantastic work going on with genomics, and furthermore, that it's now going into applied ecology and decision making around what we collect and what we do with those collections. I think that our expertise is increasing, and we need to perhaps look more at training, and the student projects that were presented today are very encouraging, and I think we could be, those of us who are involved with universities can be encouraging more work in this field. We certainly have the capacity in our botanic gardens to support training. So that's something that we can be discussing, and hopefully we can talk about the quantum of funding that's required for the species that we have to deal with going forward. And looking forward to that conversation next week with the group who will be working on that. Thanks. Is there anything else you wanted me to comment on, Bob?
No, that sounds fine. I can feel the summer school coming on.
Yeah, I can feel
great.
another career coming on right now. And, I think I'd love to clone some of the people that are in this room so that we can be doing more.
Including one behind you, which is Heidi. Yes, you.
Becky.
Heidi, you've got form. Oh, sorry, it's Beck over
Becky.
there. Beg your pardon, my glasses are not great.
Do you still want me to speak?
You got anything to say?
For me, in New Zealand, probably what I see our biggest challenge at the moment is national coordination, and we've got to get that right. And so it is very inspiring coming here and seeing all the work that's been done. And as I said in my first talk, really grateful to the support from Australia over all the years. And for us, it's in a sense a fortunate situation because we get to learn from your experiences. And so really appreciate what you share with us. And that's both the positives and the negatives that come through. And I'm probably going to Richard's one with he talking about the marketing, lobbying. I think that's probably a big space that we have. We don't have long to get certain things in place, and we've got to have that action and get moving. And I don't know, maybe we need a social scientist of how to get that kind of action going. As a pathologist, it's potentially not my expertise, but that's what I'd like to see the most.
Thanks, and thanks, Becky. Actually, just to add to that, what I want to say is, I think, as Richard mentioned, we need the success stories, and we need to publicize them. We need to have some sort of coordinated messaging about, what do we need? What is our main goals when people come asking us, what's our elevator speech? It's like, okay, this is what we want. This is what we want to get out of it, and we need to really coordinate on that so that we can start to see momentum happening.
Do you think we need to create our own collective media focus, if you like, not necessarily to issue media material, but to prepare material and share it among our community?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be essential because, you can't just, it's a bad situation out there, but you need to give people hope. And you need to let people know that actually there is some reason why we would why do you want to keep supporting this? It's like, if there isn't any hope, people are just going to turn off. So yeah, I think absolutely we need to keep at the communications.
And can I say also how much we in Australia have appreciated the New Zealand webinar series and the variety of people who've kept that rolling. It's been really important. Anybody thinking?
I'll say something, Bob.
Yep, Craig.
Similar to Angela, I suppose we've got a real threatened species focus with our interest in this breeding work. And that means we have a subset of species that we're targeting, usually the listed species. Not necessarily the best species sometimes to be focusing on because of the point in the decline that they're already on. But the other thing I've been thinking about is, what does success look like for us working on a species like Gradamnia rubescens? Is restoring that species in one part of its range success? Is it just having a small population somewhere that is resistant success? Or, are we really trying to achieve the recovery of that species across its range, which is obviously a very different and much bigger project. So, yeah, there's a lot of questions, I suppose, as to where we'll end up. Yeah.
Thanks for complicating the thing.
Bob, I've got one over here.
Yeah, kia ora. I just wanted to say that in New Zealand we've been focusing so much on the rust and the rust impacts that we've actually forgotten to really look after our species and actually understand them. And Jeff touched on it a little bit the other day around that we need to understand the associated taxa and we need to build resilient forests for these species to be able to continue into the future. So that's something that I'd really like to see a focus shift in New Zealand, that we're more species-specific focused rather than the rust focused.
Mia, anything to throw in from a West Australian perspective? No, that's okay. Don't have to. I'm just wondering.
Certainly it's I guess encouraging and feels a little bit unfair to be able to learn from all of the really unfortunate situations over here on the East Coast and in New Zealand as well. But I think we can learn a lot about the right way to do things, about the strategic way to do things.
I have a question, actually, from a West Australian perspective. And look, I'll admit it's been a fantastic conference, a little bit overwhelming in some instances and slightly terrifying, because I think about the Southwest experience. We've got almost 800 species of Myrtaceae, half of them endemic. The thought of it getting there kind of terrifies me. Perhaps if I phrase this as a question and pose it to you guys, if you were in our position and it wasn't there, but you knew it was coming, what would you be focusing on? What do you think you could have had the opportunity to do before infection? If that's a fair question, I don't know. It might be a big question.
Wow, okay.
Sorry.
Amanda, I think you're lucky in that you have a drier environment over there, and so you have so many species that can be preserved by banking. So I would suggest that the best thing that you can do to prepare is to bank multiple provenances of seed for every species that's likely to be affected, which was yeah.
Sorry,
I was actually going to say that.
Into the mic if you can, Amanda.
I was going to say, well, she just said that funding is a sticking point, and that's what I was going to say, secure funding long-term to be able to go through the entire response through to long-term management. I don't know how you do it, and if you figure it out, let me know.
Done that, maybe.
Angus, you were there at ground zero. What would you do to atone for your mistakes in 2010?
Do you want to say?
make sure you've got political clout behind you, so that the scientific decisions are enacted without political confusion, conflation, whatever the terminology might be.
Okay,
it's easy.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, that the biggest
But
issue that
seriously,
you
you're right.
have is, okay, we've found myrtle rust somewhere. All the scientists say that we should, and history across the other side of the continent says we should smash this right now. But you're at the end of a political cycle, and you've just spent $1 million on varroa mite or whatever the other thing you might have had, or horse flu, or we're coming out of a pandemic where we've got no money to be doing this stuff. Hold on, does it fall under an environmental deed? Does it fall under a plant deed? Confusion? What do we do? Sit on our hands and ultimately do nothing. And your window will be very, very, very narrow. So I'd be getting some political champions now, and obviously that's difficult because they change, but I'd be getting some political champions now that you can, or senior, doesn't necessarily need to be someone senior that has some clout that can actually say, no, I will stand behind the science that says we need to do something here.
Yeah, I've got a comment for you as well. I mean, one thing that I would do if I could start again would be collect baseline data. Actually go out there and understand your trees, understand the fruiting, flowering, recruitment, and the other species that it's associated with. That's one thing that we lacked when we started monitoring in the native forest. Myrtle rust had already arrived, so we didn't understand what a healthy ecosystem looked like at that point. So I'd do baseline monitoring.
Sorry, I won't hog the mic today, but just one of the things that I was having a conversation over at afternoon tea was about kind of broadening out our scope. We've got really detailed into species, into particular areas, but if we take a broader approach and look at how we market this to secure long-term funding, I think we need to look much wider at our conservation approach. And when I draw upon the Global Botanic Gardens Congress last year, one of the words that was really spinning around quite a lot was conservation horticulture, and I think that's what this is drawing together all these disciplines of genetics, species resistance breeding, land managers, and kind of branding this in a different way to connect and hopefully advocate to those politicians and those influential people to secure that funding.
Thanks. And Mia had her hand up a minute ago.
It's slightly tangential, but I just feel like I wanted to speak to like a very interesting piece of legislation that's coming in Western Australia that kind of brings together several threads that we've heard about in the conference, nominally genetics of our native species impacted by myrtle rust and tree breeding from that work and cultural perspectives as well. So we're introducing something called the Biodiscovery Bill, which is a piece of legislation that basically mandates that any commercial or scientific credit that comes from any of that research, including in the myrtle rust space, so if it looked at breeding a line of potentially resistant Melaleuca, for example, then those benefits have to be shared with the traditional custodians of the land. And so it's an example of where legislation can help us work together more effectively as well. So, it's a positive thing that's coming out of this.
Thank you. Is there anybody who'd like to pick up on Emma's point about horticultural science strengths in that area and how we might deploy them?
This is one of the things I'm very passionate about. And we have a couple of horticulturists in our team, and we couldn't do the work we do without them. And I come from a horticulture background as well. Conservation horticulture, yeah, it's a buzzword, but it's a bit more than that. I think that's what botanic gardens, the modern botanic gardens are starting to do and should do and will do more of. I think that was very clear from the conference in Melbourne last year that botanic gardens around the world are not just places where you go to have a nice picnic and look at pretty flowers. They're places where science is done, where conservation is undertaken, and that we can, because we're gardens, because we have an audience, people can be influenced by what we do, and we can be sending out positive messages about, and we can scare people too, like we can tell them about how scary myrtle rust is, but they can help us. They can give us some money, they can donate. We can have campaigns to raise money. We can influence industry. It's difficult. We do a bit of work with industry and, you know, sometimes it's hard to sleep at night because you are working with the mining industry. But if you can exert positive influence on industry and on people in general, then we can we can start to get together the sort of resources that we're going to need for this work. But it stems from having, from where we see it in Botanic Gardens, it stems from having professional horticulturists who are encouraged to train in the techniques that are important to plant conservation, and we do have the Australian guidelines for germplasm conservation, which have been contributed to by many people in this room and beyond, in Australia and New Zealand and beyond. And that is a document, it's a living document, it gets revised every 10 years. We can use that to develop and understand how to collect plants responsibly and to maintain data such that we can repatriate plants into the locations that are appropriate and at the appropriate time. So I think conservation horticulture is a key. It meshes beautifully with all the other techniques that are required to deal with myrtle rust in the future.
Thanks, Kathy. Sean, I'm wondering, you've been working a lot the last few years around issues of people's values and motivations, what makes them go. Anything you'd like to throw in?
Thanks, Bob. I saw you looking at me before.
You were ignoring me.
Yeah, I was, resolutely. I might actually say something completely different to what you asked, because I like to go rogue. Something maybe that hasn't been discussed here, and it has been brought up a few times, is this topic of funding. My background originally is in ecological consulting, and I really do feel like there's an opportunity here to be working with consultants who are in the field every day as part of potentially surveying for myrtle rust, but also working, at least in New South Wales with DPE, they're doing assessments of ecosystem health, of species. Are they recording myrtle rust? And potentially, here's very big picture, I don't know, maybe there could be a levy on some of these development projects for a 0.1% funding towards tackling myrtle rust on any of their sites as part of their offset agreements or something like that, because they're going to have a responsibility under legislation to maintain. I don't know how many people work in this field, but yeah, it's just a different avenue to think about. Sorry, Bob.
No, that's fine. That's great. Thanks.
So something sort of along those lines, we do get a lot of records of myrtle rust affected species on sites from BAM assessors. At the moment, if a myrtle rust affected species was to be impacted, a listed one, then it would go into the offset scheme and they would try to find credits. That would be the general pathway that most impacts to a threatened species would go down. What we're trying to do is to have myrtle rust affected species dealt with differently. So there's an option under the legislation to use something called ancillary rules. So if that happens and there's an impact, instead of paying into the offset scheme, they would pay into the conservation project. And we believe for species like some of the myrtle rust listed species, that will provide a better outcome. One development that we've been able to use that approach on is the Coffs Harbour bypass, and that was actually assessed under the old legislation, the Threatened Species Act, but the planning team were able to negotiate with the team who were doing that assessment to, instead of using that money to offset, they paid it into SOS, and that's really going to drive a lot of the initial resistance work that we're doing for Rhodamnia rubescens. So it is something we're thinking about. It's just been a really hard argument to sort of get across the line.
So that's a New South Wales example, but one of the beaut things about it, as far as it does exist at the moment, is the ability to carry that money over from year to year. It doesn't get resorbed by bloody Treasury at the end of the year, which is pretty crucial.
Yeah, that is an option we have too. Well, for these two examples we've had so far, we've been able to carry that money over.
Is that a yes over there? No? Okay.
Just going back to my earlier comment, it might have been yesterday, about getting people like Alcoa on board. Do we need to be talking, or whoever we is, talking to some of these bigger companies where, they need to be spending money on something? Can we get them spending money on myrtle rust because someone else is getting them to spend money on something else? Needs a concerted effort for someone who knows how to do that, but I think that's a real option.
There's a couple of ways of approaching that. One is to approach a company with a specific project which can appeal to their particular local circumstances or some currency of issue or something like that, but it also means it's kind of tied to what they want you to do as well as what you want to do. The other way is whether we could establish in either country a Myrtle Rust Foundation or trust, perhaps with both government and private philanthropic and public input, with adequate kudos for donors, but with more freedom of action to concentrate on the real problems rather than the cosmetic issues that the companies might prefer. Either might be a viable pathway, but we probably do need to assess the options in both directions. While we're on that, do any New Zealanders want to comment on the, you've got a trust over there, what's it called, the Project Crimson, who initially did have some activity around myrtle rust, but then not so much, I think. Is there any sort of example there that we should be looking at? Not particularly? No? Okay, shaking heads. Looks like we might be running a little dry and we're very near closing time anyway. Any last contributions? Yep.
Thank you. I used to be a teacher in private school for several years, and I would say that education from school perspective and society perspective will be much better than when we speak just between scientists. I mean that if you go to the street and ask people about myrtle rust, not so many people will answer what is it, what it can cause, and so on. However, if we, for example, can see David Attenborough or someone like David Attenborough from TV show speaking about myrtle rust, and after that with your teacher, your kids speaking about an issue, and it is global issue for your country, it can be a very good decision. Because actually, nowadays, to make a good movie with a very good narrator and good examples of beautiful trees which are supporting birds, and everyone likes birds, and trees will die, birds will die. And actually, people are more, I would say, bird-centric and mammal-centric and anthropocentric. The vast majority of society, they don't like plants because plants don't move. However, if we use a modern technology, we can show that plants are moving, plants are contributing, plants interacting with birds. Everyone loves birds, everyone loves plants, and after that we're showing that they're a tragedy. We will lose these plants, birds, and it will be a big gap. So I would say that maybe lessons for schools and also something like movie with someone like David Attenborough will be also a very good decision for society, because after that many kids will speak with their parents and parents will contribute, and we will not need money to monitor, for example, trees for resistance. We will ask kids, we will ask parents, can you see, I don't know, resistant pohutukava or rhodamnia or something else on your property? Just report, call 111, report, and after that we will help. So I'm speaking about schools and education. And
David Attenborough, or do we approach James Cameron and get an Avatar 3 happening?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any last ones? If not, I think we might ask Perry to make some closing remarks to the conference.
No, okay. Oh, okay, I'm going to go first.
I just wanted to thank, the amount of work that is involved in getting this conference up and running, just can't underestimate it. And Perry has done an absolutely fantastic job. And I also wanted to just let you know sort of how it all started, like the twinkle in the eye kind of thing. I also found out from Angus that apparently Jeff and him had been saying to Perry, we should have a conference, we should have a conference. And I can remember saying to her at a conference, when I was like, not looking at anyone, Perry, but I really think we should hold a conference and it should be in Australia. And she didn't balk at that, so there must have been something sitting in there. And then she came back end of last year and said, yep, she's going to do it. We're going to have a meeting, and sort of thought maybe 20 people might turn up and that maybe we could go out for dinner. And then it sort of morphed into this continuous thing of like, well, maybe there would be 60 people who would turn up. And I think, what do we end up with, 95? A huge undertaking, and just to sort of put it into perspective of how it started off and where it went. But I'd just like to get you all to join me in thanking Perry for putting on a marvellous conference.
Oh, they're gorgeous. No rust on them. That is so lovely. Thank you so much. Well, actually, what I was going to say was I wanted the committee to stand up, if you would. Everyone who was involved in organising this conference. There's no I in teams, apparently. And yeah, I think everyone deserves a hand, actually. Yeah, I think I've sort of had my mind blown, really, by the support of everyone for this event, and it's obviously really needed. And actually, it wasn't really that hard. Like, it it wasn't that hard. Once we sort of got going, I freaked out. I think I had a bit of a sleepless night to begin with, and but then I kind of decided I'm not going to worry about it. What's the point? To start off with, Becky didn't mention Renee, who was on the committee to start with, and Renee Johansson was also very pivotal in getting everything happening, and it's just kind of sad that she's not here to see the fruits of that. But yeah, she's been obviously very involved in the myrtle rust sphere in New Zealand. I wanted to thank Richard Snesko for making the huge flight over here to join us and to share some wisdom with us, and we look forward to the workshops happening over Monday, Tuesday, and also for the field trip tomorrow. The field trip, I just remind people who are coming, I will be meeting anyone who's coming in Manly, because I live over that way, and but the ferry trip over is a delight. And yeah, so if you can get to Manly by 10 o'clock, we'll be meeting up with the buses and driving around and having a look around at some sites, some infected sites, and also just some beautiful landscape. I think I just probably, I do want to thank ANPC, who took over, Joe Lynch at ANPC took over the managing of the finances, and that was just a huge relief because everything kind of was taken off our plates and managed elsewhere. I also, Cameron and Karen, oh God, because I'm just on the stage, I've just forgotten his names, Armstrong, who are from the committee, the conference organisers who are just standing over there, were really fantastic and have just sort of any problem that arose. Yeah, they got us into that lovely place for dinner, and that was really fantastic. I think Bob and I were going, we go to the Petersham Bolo, like we're scientists, we just want a beer and, basic, and we kind of got steered to a nice venue, which was just really lovely, and so that was really great. And also Ben Alter, is Ben still around? No, he's gone. Yeah. Anyway, that was he really facilitated the funding that came through for this, which was great from the federal government. So and all the other sponsors which have put in money from New Zealand and from Australia. And of course, moving forward with all the attendees, people who've come, which is obviously what makes the conference. And I think Where to from here was coined by Renee. That was the heading, and I think that was a really good sort of statement to have for the conference. And now I think we've built some momentum now to move forward. And I think, it's, I should also acknowledge that Bob, Jeff, Angus, I feel from our end in Australia, just, wow, they've just kept the flag flying all this time and really kept things running, and everyone else has kind of kept up with them. So, it started something amazing, and we will continue it as much as we can. So, great. Thanks, everyone, for coming. It's just been amazing. Yeah. And thanks for the flowers.